Trigger warning. This happened in college. At the time, I was 18 and a sophomore. I just recently gotten out of a 6-year relationship and was starting to get into the dating scene. I downloaded Tinder and got to swiping. Some background. I didn't want to talk to someone who went to my university because thinking about running into someone that I was talking to out in the wild really made me anxious. I ended up matching with this guy. We'll call him Marco. Marco was 20 and a junior in a neighboring university about 15 minutes up the road. He had one selfie, and the other 2 pictures he had were group photos, and they seemed older, but I didn't think much of it. We started chatting, and very quickly, he asked for my phone number. I would say it was a little too early for that, but he kept on insisting, and I eventually gave in. After about 2 days of talking, he started to ask me for pictures, so I would send selfies. He would ask me for more provocative pictures, and I kept shutting him down, telling him I wasn't interested in that, and I just wanted to see where things went. Marco would say that he couldn't wait to meet me so that he could kiss me, and every time he would say that, I would change the subject. We planned a date after a week of talking. He said he knew a good Indian restaurant over by his school, and that we could walk into the downtown area after. I agreed, as it was a public scene. The day came for the date, and I started to get a weird feeling. I told my roommate what we had planned, and she said that she would keep her phone on if I needed her. A few hours before the date, I got cold feet and told him that my car wouldn't start, and asked to reschedule. He offered to pick me up, but I kept telling him no, and that we should reschedule. But he kept on insisting, and started to make me feel guilty. He would say how he was looking forward to it the past few days, and I was hurting his feelings. That he would be more than willing to get me, but I'm not giving him the chance. Well, I caved, and it was the worst decision. Despite the feelings I was having, I told him the information to get to the lot outside my dorm. Right when I got into the car, I realized that it was probably going to be a horrible date. Right away, he tried to hold my hand and asked me to give him a kiss. I denied him, so he started to drive off. On the way to our destination, he drops that we're no longer going to the restaurant and that we're going to his apartment instead, and that he would cook dinner for me. At this point, my heart sank, and I started to have a small panic attack. I texted my roommate, letting her know. She was worried and said that she would come and get me if I needed. Again, not listening to my gut, I told her that it's fine, and we get to his place. When I said this apartment was disgusting, I mean it was covered with trash, dirty clothes, and dishes. He said that we had to go back into his room because his roommate was home, and he didn't like it when he had company. His bedroom was even worse than the common area. There was only a single path to his bed and his bathroom. It was so dirty. We sat on his bed and he turned on a movie. I can't remember the movie. All I remember was the stench from the room and him starting to make advances on me. Marco started rubbing my back and shoulders. I kept scooting away, trying to put some distance between us, but it didn't work. After a few minutes, he started to force himself on me. He started to kiss me hard and holding my head so I couldn't move it. I don't know how, but he was eventually on top of me, forcing his entire body weight on me, and I couldn't move an inch. I'm paralyzed by fear. He doesn't get much further than that because as soon as he gets on me, he just as quickly gets off and runs to his restroom. He's throwing up. I've never been so thankful for vomit. When he came out, he apologized about getting sick, that it happens all the time, and says that he needs to take me home. Trembling, I just get up, straighten myself, and follow him out. I don't know if he's going to try anything else, and I don't want to aggravate him or say anything wrong, so I tried to act like nothing was wrong to get home safely, and luckily that happens. He pulls up to my building and tells me that he wants to make it up to me, and I just nod and say goodnight and get out of his car. Once inside, I block him, report him on Tinder, and delete the app. I also took extra measures to block him on any social media I could. I didn't tell anyone at first what happened. I was embarrassed because I put myself in that position. I started getting calls from random numbers, and when I answered, there wouldn't be anyone on the other line. I would block the number, and a new one would end up calling. It got to the point where my phone was ringing constantly. After the phone calls were random Facebook and Instagram messages from different accounts. They would say things like, "Why are you ignoring me? Why aren't you talking to me?" Then they started getting more aggressive and threatening. My roommate started getting messages too, and I tell her everything. She told me I needed to report him, or at least tell my parents. I didn't do either because I was scared. That was until I started receiving random pictures of myself. I would be walking on campus, in the dining hall, in class. Then I got one of me in my dorm room. It was taken through a window which is on the second floor. However, the main street has a hill that was the same level as my window and is what my room faced. My bed was in the front of that window. I told my roommate and she made me tell the RA. The RA was very concerned and ended up calling campus police. I made a report with them. The messages continued, and so did the photos until one day, about a week later, he approached me on campus. He grabbed me by my arm and tried to take me to his car. I started to yell and luckily there were campus police nearby. He was arrested and banned from my campus, and I didn't hear from him again. This was quite a few years ago, so some of my memories aren't as vivid, as I've tried to block this part of my past out. Not many people know that this happened to me. To this day, my family doesn't know. The only people that know are my college roommate, the RA, the campus police, my therapist, and as of the other night, my fiancé. I want to spread awareness of the dangers of online dating. Always trust your gut. If something doesn't seem right, it probably isn't. Not all online dates have consequences. I met my fiancé a few years later on a different online dating profile. But your gut is usually right, and sometimes it's crucial to listen to it. With that being said, Marco, let's not meet again. I was on Grindr, a queer dating hookup app. I was talking to this guy, and it was pretty casual at first. We were just chatting, and he wanted me to come over and hook up. I told him that I was just in the area hanging out with a friend and waiting for another to get here. He kept pushing the idea, and suddenly he got closer to me on the app, from being under a mile away to under 2,000 feet away. I asked him what he was doing because he somehow got closer. He said he was just driving around. First red flag that I should have picked up on. I eventually asked him if he was driving around a graveyard, and he said yes. And one thing led to another, and I met him up outside the graveyard entrance and told him it was like a 2-minute walk from my friend's house to the entrance. So I start walking. I get not but a few yards towards the entrance from my friend's house when a car pulls over. It's him, skinnier than I saw him in the pictures. He immediately starts rubbing himself, asking if I want to take a ride around the block. I told him I wasn't getting into a stranger's car in a town that I'm not familiar with. Eventually, he drove off down the road. Now, I didn't think to wait until he was way down the road to head back inside, which was probably my biggest mistake. This part is speculation, but I'm sure he waited to see what house I went into. After a text conversation of him telling me that we should have done stuff in the graveyard, I told him that would be disrespectful to the dead, and he said he didn't care. Then I tried to send a message saying, I care, but the message didn't send. So I opened the app and he blocked me. Whatever, people block others all the time. I get a few more messages from other people, but tell them the same thing, that I'm at a friend's house and I can't just pop out. After that, I went to sleep on the couch in the front room. Next thing I know, I'm awake. I didn't know why. The sun wasn't shining through the curtains, so it couldn't be that early. My body usually wakes me up around 6 or 7 a.m. So I lay there for a second, and I hear a knock on the window behind and to the right of me. My first thought was someone next door was doing work on their house. They were only a few yards away after all. That was until I heard the knock again. But who's doing that on a Tuesday morning? I was immediately frightened that it was the guy from last night, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe one of my friends got stuck outside and needed me to come and open the door. But then I heard a knock on the window from the other side of the sunroom. At this point, I'm just freaking out and my mind is racing. My first idea is to grab the phone and check the time. It was only 5 a.m. I tried calling my friend as I really didn't want to wake both of them up. The first call didn't get picked up. I decided, fuck it, I'm gonna peek through the window that the front door has. Mind you, there's curtains on it, because those windows take up most of the door. But first, I checked the deadbolt. It was unlocked, so I attempted to lock it. This was an old brass deadbolt that, quite frankly, I didn't know how it worked. So I decided to peek through the window. Thankfully, no one was out there but their cat, so I let it in. After this, I said fuck it and woke up everyone. There was no more knocking. I checked on my phone and saw that there was a blank profile about 350 feet away. I then refreshed it and they were 800 feet away. After I saw this, I didn't know what to think. I frantically searched through my settings on Grindr to find out how to turn my location off. I couldn't figure it out, so I signed off the app. Now I'm upstairs relaxing with my friend, hoping not to hear another knock on the window. So creepy guy from Grindr, let's not meet. This happened to me and my boyfriend about 2 years ago. We live in a city that has a main downtown area. The city is pretty liberal, but once you get out into the country, it becomes quite the opposite. That being said, the main city and especially the downtown area has a pretty bad homeless problem that has only gotten worse over the years. For the most part, the homeless population is pretty harmless. They know the good spots to hang out. A lot of the time, they just smile at you, and I always smile back, and you go on your way. Sadly, there has been an increase of incidents in the last few years with the rise of overdose and addictive street drugs. I was living in the main downtown area at the time, having recently graduated college and wanting to be close to the nightlife. My best friend that I met in college and I were roommates. We had an apartment right in the middle of downtown. It was a perfect setup. My boyfriend, let's call him Jack, happened to live one block down, and then about 5 or 6 blocks south of that. It was about a 10-minute walk, give or take. It was even closer to the heart of downtown as well, so you can imagine how convenient that made it to hang out and not having to take a car and worry about parking. One overcast Sunday morning, my boyfriend and I woke up at my place and decided to walk over to his so that he could grab some things. We had walked the majority of the way. It really was just a straight walk on sidewalks the whole time. We were on the right side of the road, with the street to our left. We're not 1 minute away from my boyfriend's place when I notice someone ahead that makes me feel a bit uneasy. First off, the guy was walking in front of us in the same direction as we were, with his back to us. I could see he has both earbuds in. He was walking about the same pace, so we weren't about to run into him or anything. In front of him, facing and walking towards all of us, is a different guy. He had a small frame, maybe 5'8", wearing dark pants, a red sweatshirt with the hood up, and a backpack. Even though his hood was up, I could see his face. Some short black hair poked out, pale skin, and these black, beady crazy eyes that I'll never forget. I assumed him to be homeless, as it was an area popular for them. Now, he wasn't looking at us, but rather the pedestrian with earbuds in, who happened to be closer to him and in front of us. All of a sudden, I see the homeless guy run and quite literally rush the pedestrian in front of us. Like, ran up and then stopped about a half a foot from the poor dude's face. Since the guy had his headphones in, he probably just wanted to mind his own business and walk home quietly. He was clearly taken by surprise and stopped and took one of his earbuds out to see what the crazy dude wanted. Me, while I'm a risk taker, I don't like putting myself in the wrong place when I don't need to be. This freaked me out and I didn't want the guy to notice us and come at us next, so I stepped left off the sidewalk into the street. There's a pretty big lane for street parking and it was lined with parked cars, so I conveniently hid myself from view behind a car. As I continued walking, I heard the guy start yelling obscenities at the poor pedestrian. Things like, "I'm gonna run you over with a car. I'm gonna find you." Like I said, we were not 100 feet from the entrance of my boyfriend's apartment at this point, and after witnessing that, I just wanted to be inside. My boyfriend had continued walking on the sidewalk, and in an instant, I came back in view, and we turned right towards the apartment. Now, the apartment did have a main entrance from the street on a sidewalk, but my boyfriend had just moved in and didn't have the code for the front door yet. All he had was his fob to the parking garage that led to the stairwell into his place. We were using that at the time to get in. We walked up to the parking garage door and clicked the button, so it started to roll up. I hadn't looked behind me at this point. I knew I probably should have. But a lot of times, if you ignore the crazy people, for lack of better words, they will in turn not bother you. So I was kind of following that tactic at the moment. The garage door was open and we went inside. My boyfriend clicked the button to close it. We started the short walk to the door to the stairwell. The garage door was nearly closed. I don't know what prompted me to look back, but I did, and what I saw still gives me chills today. It was a homeless guy from the street. He was squeezing under the garage door while he still could. I remember the chill that ran down my spine as I locked eyes with him and yelled at my boyfriend, "Jack, he's following us." I'm not sure what I expected my boyfriend to do, but he pushed the door to the stairwell open and started running. That was the oh shit moment when I realized this guy had access inside, because the door to the stairwell didn't require a fob or have a lock. Me definitely not wanting to be closest to this guy, I took off running after my boyfriend. As I pushed the door open and got inside the stairwell, I could hear the guy behind me doing the same thing as it was swinging back closed. I looked back and locked eyes with the crazy guy once again, and about shit myself as I realized my only option was to keep running and try to make it inside the apartment and close the door before he got there. Yeah, this guy was smaller, but what really freaked me out is since he had a backpack, I had no idea if he had a knife or gun in there. I mean shit, why else would you chase two people and outnumber yourself? My boyfriend lived on the 3rd floor, of course, so we proceeded to sprint up 3 flights of stairs. I could hear this guy's pounding footsteps behind me. At last, we were at our level and opened the door to the hallway and sprinted to his unit, and without looking back, unlocked the door as fast as we could. Still felt slower than hell to this day. We slammed the door shut behind us. I remember looking through the peephole and expecting to see the guy standing there, ready to yell at us. But nothing. My heart was pounding. I mean, what the fuck just happened? We called the cops and told them what happened to us. I'll admit they probably did all they could, but I didn't feel like it was enough. I was freaked out. This dude now had access and was inside the building with access to all the apartments and residents. I kept imagining him hiding in the stairwell for the next poor soul. Well, the cops came, drove around the perimeter of the complex for a few minutes, weren't able to search inside of the building because apparently they don't have access in and we're not allowed to let them in. They left not finding anyone. It took me forever to get the urge to finally leave the apartment to go run our Sunday errands, but we did. I'm sure the guy was high on drugs and decided to be crazy that morning and bother some unlucky people. He probably left after he realized he was screwed if people found him there and someone else called the cops. Hi all, 34-year-old female. I'm not looking for advice, I just want to share my story. Many years back, I dated a man-child, relatively the same age as myself. We got along quite well. He presented gentlemanly, hospitable, kind, and loving. In hindsight, things escalated quite quickly. We went from being friends to being exclusive within a month. Not enough time to truly know someone. This story is quite lengthy. I'll do my best to shorten it without leaving out integral details. We saw each other daily. We mostly hung out at his home. That was fine with me in the beginning, as I'm rather introverted. A couple months into our relationship, I started to question why we weren't leaving the house. while we weren't going out and experiencing new things and trying out new hobbies. His responses were always cloudy. He always tried to redirect the conversation, thinking I was stupid and I couldn't tell that this was an obvious avoidance tactic. That was the point where I started becoming curious, and from there it went downhill. I'm not an intrusive person, but considering he was my partner, I had the right to inquire as to why we were isolating ourselves. After some mild questioning for a few weeks, I noticed he began to create distance. This noticeable change was hard to ignore and pretty much confirmed my suspicions. However, I'm not going to make a decision based on assumptions. I'm ashamed to admit this, but one night while we were sleeping, I went through his phone. I still feel disgusting even though I found 100% proof that I was a side chick. I could not believe it. I still can't. I was with this person daily. It obviously confirmed why we were so confined to his house, but it was perplexing because she had no idea about me. It was about 2 a.m. when I looked through his phone. There was no way I could sleep beside him for the remainder of the morning, so I quietly got out of bed, collected my things, and went home. The next day, I believe he realized what had happened. However, he never contacted me to see why I left. Things remained silent for the entire day, and then I received a phone call later in the evening. I confronted him. Again, I'm ashamed to say this, but I did take photos of the evidence as I knew he would try to gaslight me. The fury in his voice was palpable. He did what a usual abuser would do, blame me for going through his phone while totally ignoring his infidelity. It was utterly pathetic. He had created this delusion that I was going to contact the other girlfriend and tell her all of his wrongdoings, all his infidelity, lying, cheating. I would have done this, however, while I was looking through his phone, I realized that the girl was very sheltered. She was completely oblivious to what was going on. I was afraid that he would retaliate against myself and her, and I thought to myself that she would eventually find out. I do regret not informing her. However, my decision was my decision, and I can't change that. This is where my nightmare begins. He was so paranoid and confident that I was going to contact his girlfriend that he would constantly call me daily and make vague threats against me. I persistently advised him that I would not contact her, that it was none of my business, that she would eventually find out that he was a deceitful, inept brainworm sooner or later. All I wanted was for him to fuck off, leave me alone, and never speak to me again. That was my only request. He obviously didn't take my kind words so well, and he continued to harass me. Only a few days later, things completely erupted. His paranoia exceeded to levels I've never seen before. He sent me threatening messages with the context being, "I have compromising photos of you, and I will release them," as he believed that I would ruin his relationship. I couldn't believe the delusion. No matter what I said, no matter how I phrased it, I even had my mom speak with him at one point, but it was useless. I sent him a message stating that if this was true, and if he ever messaged me again, I was going to call the cops. 5 minutes later, I received 11 messages in succession. A few were videos, photos, and personalized animation of myself. I had never seen those images, videos, and animations before. These were taken without my consent. These were extremely intimate and compromising. Unbeknownst to me, he had cameras set up all around his room. These weren't just threats, these were screenshots of these images, videos, and animations uploaded on various sharing sites. Luckily, he lacked intelligence. He sent me the evidence. There was nothing I could do to stop the uploads. I immediately went to the police. They did manage to take some down. However, there were no promises as once a photo is uploaded, it could be immediately archived. This forever altered my life. I don't see relationships the same. I can't be intimate. I can't form strong bonds. I've become apathetic. I'm forensically observant. I have difficulty trusting everyone, even my family, and so much more. In conclusion, the police were rather efficient and treated me well. I was granted an immediate protection order, family violence order. He broke that quite quickly and called my phone, trying his best to apologize, begging me to drop the charges. He was so pathetic that he got his mommy to bring me and tried to persuade me. I immediately called the police and they took immediate action. This ended up going to court. I won. It's not the result that I wanted. However, he did get his name on the good old sex offender registry, which is far more egregious than people may think. Nevertheless, this is beyond life-changing. To all who have gone through this, I'm sorry, and I feel your pain. Be careful around people who you think you can trust. I know that's quite nihilistic and pessimistic, but those are some of the unfortunate aspects of life. It's quite paradoxical. Humans are social creatures, but many humans are pure rat shit. I'm a 41-year-old female. I live in Montana, and a few years ago I was forced to relocate after my landlord decided to rent to her son. The community I had lived in for 11 and a half years had become incredibly expensive. Unfortunately, I was forced to relocate to another city, and because of this unexpected move and associated costs, I had to move in with a roommate. My roommate left to pursue better job prospects about 3 months after I moved in. Our unit was a triplex, so there were 2 gentlemen who inhabited the other 2 units. I was never added to the lease as the property manager required a full deposit, and I was not in a financially healthy spot at the time. I remained in the unit for a year and a half on my own, paying rent and utilities. I became very good friends with the man in the unit closest to mine. We'll call him Devin, a 52-year-old male. Devin was a disabled veteran in recovery. I also am a veteran, so he held a soft spot in my heart. We shared meals, hung out, and discussed all of life's mysteries, and would look out for one another. Devin had gone to treatment for 6 weeks, and I watched his cat while he was gone. Our friendship developed over the course of 1.5 years. Devin had expressed romantic interest. However, right from the beginning, I had clearly informed Devin that I did not share those feelings, and we would never be more than just good friends. Devin seemed to be lonely, which made sense. However, I am a person who requires alone time to recharge my batteries. I would catch him walking through the front yard multiple times a day to get the mail, which I believed was to see if I was outside so he could stop and chat. When I'd leave in the morning to go to work, Devin was always outside to tell me that I looked nice and have a good day. I told him that made me feel uncomfortable, and he should just send a text letting me know that he wanted to hang out and wait for a response. There were a couple times I yelled at him for overstepping my boundaries. The first, I had just got home and pulled into my garage. I was on a phone call and stayed in the car. Devin looked through the garage window to see if I was home. I was annoyed, but didn't really think too much of it. The second, I was getting dressed in my room in the summer, so the window was cracked. I felt this was safe as the window was not placed that anyone should be walking by, as it was on my patio on the back of my home. I caught Devin peeking through it. I lost it. I let Devin know under no certain terms his behavior was appropriate, and that if he didn't respect my boundaries, we would no longer be friends. Last year, while I was still at home, I asked Devin to watch my dogs for a couple days so I could go to a family event out of state. Devin was happy to help, and I was very appreciative. Not long after I returned, I started to notice strange things in my home, but I really just thought it was me. For instance, it was fairly certain that I had locked the door in the morning when I left for work, but when I returned, it would be unlocked. I would be sure that I had shut off all the lights, but when I got home in the evening, one would be on. I really just thought it was absent-mindedness. Fast forward a couple months. My mom became sick with cancer. My sister watched my dog while I went to tend to my mom. My sister reached out to me and asked me if anyone else had a key to the apartment. I let her know that she had the only spare key, and asked why. She said she experienced the same issues with the lights and locks. I had not shared my concerns with my sister prior to her communicating hers with me, as I really doubted my own sanity. While I was out of town, I received a text message from Devin asking if I had a potato he could borrow. I let him know that I was out of state with my mom, who was sick. Devin did not reply, which was out of character, but I had noticed a change in Devin's affect. He was more reserved and less friendly towards me. I thought it had to do with my firm adherence to my boundaries, which was okay. He didn't have to like them, just respect them. When I got back to town, one night, I stayed over at my sister's house after helping her move. As mentioned above, I was struggling financially, so I would carefully budget and plan my weekly meals. The morning before my sister's move, I had placed 3 pieces of bacon in a Ziploc to be used later for a BLT. When I returned the following morning, much to my belief, there were only 2 pieces of bacon. I held the bag in my hands knowing that there had been 3. No longer did I doubt myself. I called my sister and let her know that someone had been getting into my house that I always kept locked. The only logical thing that could have happened is Devin made a copy of my key when he was watching my dog in the fall. My sister reminded me of the potato text. The potato in the counter basket was gone. I had enough information to be certain my neighbor has violated my trust and was no friend. However, I still wasn't afraid of him. As I mentioned, he is a disabled vet and was somewhat feeble and sickly. I was not scared of confrontation. I immediately went to a hardware store, purchased a camera that streams to your phone once the motion detector has been activated. I placed it facing the side door where Devin would enter. It also has two-way audio capability, so my plan was that when Devin decided to enter my home again, I would see it and say over the camera something to the effect of, "Get the fuck out of my house, put the key you copied on the counter, and never try to speak to me again, or I will contact law enforcement." As I wrote above, I was not on the lease and did not want to be homeless, so I could not turn to the property manager for help, and Devin knew it. In the evenings, I started placing a jug of cat litter and a kitchen chair in front of the door that I knew Devin was accessing, but I never expected he would attempt to come in while I was at home, and really, he had only taken a piece of uncooked bacon and a potato. Laying on the couch one night, watching TV, I thought I heard something sliding on the floor in the laundry room where the door was, but I knew there was no way that he would come in while I was home. My cat was running around playing, so I decided that it was probably just her, and that I was just being paranoid because of all that had happened. The next morning, while changing my laundry, I noticed the litter and chair had been pushed 3 to 4 inches. I checked the sensitivity of the camera and found that I was able to replicate by slowly opening the door. Devin had tried to come in while I was home. Why? That morning, I took bear spray into the shower with me while my knees knocked. I was terrified. I felt vulnerable and violated. Devin knew that I knew now also. He knew that I had placed a barrier in front of the door. After that morning, he never was outside in the morning, nor did he walk through the yard to get his mail. I obtained a firearm for protection and did make a police report. The police officer was annoyed with me as I didn't want them to approach Devin, as all Devin would need to do is report me to the property manager, and I would be homeless. I'm grateful that whatever he was up to was apparently prevented. The fact that he tried to come in when he knew I was home gives me the heebie-jeebies. I wonder if he went through my underwear, watched me while I slept. Since then, my situation has greatly improved. I ended up moving shortly after to take care of my mom. I got my own place again a few months ago. I never put my trust into another neighbor for a pet or house sitting again. It still blows my mind that I had some douchebag stealing from me and likely stalking me. This story just solidifies one should always trust their gut. There were so many times that a red flag was screaming, and I thought I was just being crazy. Hello everyone. I'm very new to posting on here, so please bear with me. I wanted to share my story that has occurred over the last 5 years. This story is about me, currently 20, and my stalker ex, currently 23. 2019 to 2021, the start of our relationship. 5 years ago, I met my ex. I'll call him Alex for my own safety. In early to mid 2019, I came across Alex's profile on Instagram and recognized him as a student who attended the same high school as me. I always thought he was attractive, so I followed him on Instagram, and to my surprise, he actually responded to one of my stories. We started messaging on Instagram back and forth, then both of us quickly found out that we liked each other. One night, when I had fallen asleep on the phone with Alex, I heard his voice coming from the phone whispering something like, "I would rape you," and other things along that manner. I thought I was hearing things, so I brushed it off, thinking I was just dreaming. Eventually, me and him started dating and going on dates. Everything went pretty well, except for the fact that when we would kiss, he would bite me extremely hard, to the point that it would make me bleed. I told him multiple times not to do it, but he would always continue. A couple months into dating, a girl had made a video on Instagram claiming he was a cheater, but he denied to me that he even knew this girl, and I believed him. 10 months of dating went by, and a friend sent me screenshots of him being active on Tinder. I immediately broke up with him after that. A couple months later, I started dating someone new. During this relationship with my new partner, Alex would blow up my phone with messages and calls. I decided to block him. He then started driving past my house every single day. At this point, I had started my first job and he would eventually show up there too. I even moved jobs and he found me there as well. Getting back together 2021 to 2023. The situation eventually died down. Randomly, out of the blue, I got a flower delivery of pink roses. It had Alex's name on the card attached, but nothing written. Being the stupid 17-year-old senior in high school I was, I actually unblocked him and thanked him. He asked me to hang out, and I willingly went to hang out with him soon after we started texting. My 17-year-old self thought it would be cool dating a hot, well-known older boy, so I eventually fell back into Alex. After a couple times of hanging out, we started dating again. I eventually lost my V card to Alex, and we started regularly sleeping with each other. One day he texted me saying that he had a surprise for me, and then sent me an iCloud file. I opened the file and it was a video of us having sex. I had no idea he had been recording us. I couldn't even consent as I was 17 at the time, and he was 20. Again, stupid 17-year-old me stayed with him, regardless of the red flags. Eventually, our relationship became sexually and physically abusive. One night, he raped me while I was intoxicated and unconscious, and left bruises on my head and abdomen. A couple days after that, I decided enough was enough and broke up with him. The stalking, 2023 to 2024. Immediately following the breakup, he would constantly text and call me. He would beg me to see him. I kept denying him, but he kept going. He would threaten to come to my house in the middle of the night while I was sleeping. This happened for a couple months. During this time, I met someone new and we started dating. I was having trouble with my mom, and my new partner asked me to come move in with him. Somehow, Alex found out where me and my new partner were living, so we started showing up at our place. We documented everything from our cameras and ended up filing a restraining order against Alex. We got granted a temp order until our hearing. Our hearing date came, and the judge extended the temporary order to let things cool down for 6 months. If he breaks the order, the judge will grant him a long-term order at the next hearing. Within days of extending the temp order, Alex violated it by parking in front of my house on multiple occasions. I called the cops multiple times, but they never even gave him a warning. One day, while I was working, I get a call from my local PD that Alex tried purchasing a firearm, which violates our order. They just warned him not to do that again and had to let me know for my safety. Obviously, knowing that your ex tried to purchase a firearm is scary itself. The following days, he would follow me to work and stand in front of my boyfriend's truck in the early hours of the morning. My current, fleeing 2024. He would start tailgating me on my way to work or swerve in front of me with his car. My boyfriend and I moved somewhere else but are still in the same city. Somehow, Alex still managed to find us. My boyfriend decided that if the cops weren't going to help us, then we would need to leave the state. We ended up packing everything in the middle of the night and driving a state over where my boyfriend's family lives. We've been here about 2 months. My boyfriend and I found good jobs and plan on leasing our own apartment soon. It's been peaceful for the most part. However, I still hear about what Alex does back home. He still tells everyone that we are together, still even posts pictures of me on Instagram. My story is still ongoing, and I've left out a lot of details. So this happened to my mom maybe 3 years ago. My mom has now passed away, but she was maybe 40 at the time. She was a very pretty woman, looking young for her age. She often had total strangers propose to her. Everyone was pretty much obsessed with her. That being said, she was no stranger to dealing with creeps. So one day she was at Woodman's, a grocery store for those who don't know. It wasn't really a bad area, but it was close to a bad area and was right off the freeway, so it could be a little sketchy. She always told me that she didn't want me going there alone, especially at night. When I would go with her at night, I would not leave her side, even though I was 18 to 20 at the time. So anyways, she was there during the day, doing her grocery shopping alone. She noticed a man in the same aisle as her. He was looking at her, and when she turned to look at him, he would look away and act like he was looking at something else on the shelves. Honestly, she didn't think much of it. As I mentioned, she dealt with her fair share of creeps. So she grabbed what she needed and moved to another aisle. That is when she noticed him again, in the same aisle as her, doing the same thing. This time it kind of rubbed her the wrong way, but she went on with her business and again moved on. The man kept following her throughout the store. Now it's worth mentioning that my mom was not one to be messed with. She was very confrontational, never backing away from a fight, has beaten the shit out of men, taking beatings from men, usually carried a weapon. So as she was getting ready to check out, he was still following her. Now she's pretty pissed off and didn't feel safe leaving. She alerted an employee who went to go get a manager. My mom took this opportunity to tell him off, saying something like, "Can I help you? What the fuck do you want?" He replied to her saying, "You look like the kind of girl who would look really good in someone's basement." At this point, she was not only mad, but absolutely terrified. The manager came, and while my mom was telling them about the guy and what he had said, he ran off. The police were called, and they were able to locate him in or around the building. They escorted him off the property, but that was all. My mom was so afraid that the guy was lurking somewhere, waiting to see what car she got in, and then proceeded to follow her. She ended up calling me in tears, saying that she was afraid that she was going to be followed or abducted, and that she wanted someone to know. So she and I stayed on the phone till she was home. It took a lot to shake or scare my mom, but she really had a good intuition. So for her to be as shaken as she was, he had to be as creepy as they come. His comment to her only proved that further. In the end, she was okay, but I can't imagine what would have happened if she didn't tell someone, or if he did wait for her and followed her. I feel lucky that these encounters all happened in public places. For reference, I'm a 24-year-old female. I have freckles and naturally red hair. I'm about 5'7". The first time this man, who appeared to be about the same age and height, approached me while I was in a popular downtown bar with my best friend. I saw this man approach and I was not interested, so as not to lead him on, I kept my responses short. The conversations went as follows. His intro line was, "You have so many freckles. They are in such random places. That's how freckles work. That is how you know you're a real redhead." I was creeped the fuck out at this point. I am well aware. He lingered to ask a couple more pointless questions until my friend and I managed to get away. My friend and I ended up going to a different bar across the street a little later in the night. We had settled into the new bar, a little drunker, and my friend went into the bathroom, leaving me at the high top table up against the wall. The same man appeared out of nowhere to my left and put one arm against the table and the other against the wall, so I had nowhere to go. He said to me, "You're the redhead from before." Fellas, never physically trap a girl you're trying to hit on. I was extremely uncomfortable, but I figured my friend would be back soon and would be able to help me out of the situation without causing a scene. He asked me several awkward questions. Meanwhile, I had secretly texted my friend to hurry back and save me from this creepy guy. He then asked, "Take a picture with me." Why? For the memories. I was still trapped, and I was hoping that if I complied, he would leave me alone, so I let him take a picture of us while I was smiling a fake hostage smile. My friend had reappeared, but was standing by the bar and not approaching the table. I pretended to be drunker than I was and rushed over to her, gushing, "Oh my god, you're back. Let's go dance." I dragged her away and explained the situation. Fast forward a week. My next encounter with this man was at a completely different and very busy bar with a different female friend of mine. I was having a good time and suddenly I looked to the left and this man was, I kid you not, running in my direction, phone outstretched, with a picture that he forced to take with me on a screen. I had enough and was done being polite to save his feelings. As I sat there scared, I told him, "Leave me alone, you creep me out." He venomously replies, "Well, you're an ugly bitch anyways." My friend catches wind that something's going on, and as he walks away, they offered to protect me if needed. For months, I thought that would be my last interaction with this man. I was wrong. I had taken it as a warning, an example of how men's demeanors can change once they've been rejected, and it was chilling. 7 months later, I had forgotten about the prior encounters, and I was casually browsing the drugstore makeup display at night after the gym. I was looking down at a product when my spidey senses started going off. Someone was standing on the other side of the display and staring at me in my periphery. I look up and this man was 2 feet in front of me. I did not yet realize, but it was the same man. He asked me if the drugstore we were in sold chapstick. It's a drugstore. Everyone without fail sells chapstick. Taken aback, my initial thought was that he assumed that I was an employee, and I replied, "I don't work here." He smiled a slow smile, maintained eye contact, and said, "Okay." We both continued shopping until he returned to another makeup aisle that I was in at the store. He said, "I think I've met you before." I told him I don't believe we had, as I truly didn't remember him yet. He began to ask me questions that every girl my age in the city would answer yes to. "Have you been downtown before?" "Well, yeah, everyone has." "But like every weekend?" "Not every single weekend." "No, but last summer, with girls." At this point, I was getting a really bad feeling in my stomach. Everything about his body language, demeanor, and the things he was saying felt off, and he was staring. He insisted 2 more times that we had met and would not let it go, so I suggested, "Lots of people confuse me with other redheads they've met before. I'm sorry, I don't remember meeting you." He stared at me another moment and slowly said, "No, I know the redhead I spoke to." I began walking to the register and he followed. As I walked, it finally clicks in who it was. and I was afraid. His social awareness and weird questions made me sure it was him. I played it cool until I paid for my items and I was leaving the store. I didn't look back, but I knew he had items to pay for before he could follow. So as soon as I was at the door, I sprinted to my car, got in, locked it, and sat for a moment stunned as I processed what happened. I came to my senses quickly and I drove to the parking lot exit. I looked back and he was just outside the doors of the pharmacy, his head looking back and forth across the parking lot looking for me. I knew he saw my car leaving the parking lot, and since it was night, only a few people were at the pharmacy, so it was clearly me leaving. I took note of the car that he was walking to and decided to take an extra long route home to ensure I wasn't being followed. This route led through a wealthy neighborhood at the far east end of my city, so there is nothing that way aside from high-end homes. I looped through a roundabout in this neighborhood, and I saw a car matching his drive straight through. There was no way to know if it was his, however, it was chilling. There were no signs of his car after that. A couple weekends later was my final encounter. It was St. Patty's Day, and the bars downtown were as packed as I've ever seen them. I was in the same bar he had first approached me in the months before, but I was alone as I was waiting for a friend to get through security. He rushes up to me from the crowd. He says, "Hey, I know you from the pharmacy." I had to assertly tell him to leave me alone multiple times. He kept asking, "Why, do you have a boyfriend?" I responded again, saying, "None of your business, leave me alone." It is interesting how some men only seem to take another man's claim to a woman as a no, and not a woman's obvious and direct disinterest. To this day, another 7 months later, that was the last I saw of him. I'm lucky these encounters were in public. They could have easily turned violent otherwise. I wrote this hoping to show other women being assertive and at times rude is completely okay and necessary to protect yourself. Some men don't take no for an answer that easily. To this day, it baffles me why he was trying so hard to make me remember him after he called me an ugly bitch. Always stay vigilant, ladies. I traveled to Seoul for a week by myself back in 2018. Because I was still studying, and at the time doing a semester abroad in Kyoto, and Seoul is expensive, I decided to book a room in a hostel. It was supposed to be a mixed dorm for 6 people. Upon arrival, I found out that I was actually going to share a room with 5 men who were already staying at the hostel. At that point, I was still quite naive and didn't think much of it. Besides, the hostel was already fully booked. There was one guy from Japan, one Korea, 2 Chinese, and a German in my room. The German guy gave me weird vibes from the beginning, especially by the way he just stared at me, but I brushed it off because I'll be out and about all day anyway. Every day he would ask me if I wanted to hang out and go see the sights together, which I really like to do on my own. So I always came up with an excuse. One time, I accepted his invitation to explore Gangnam, and it was just awkward. We had very little to speak about besides small talk. When I get ready in the morning, as in apply makeup and do my hair, he'd just stand there and watch, saying nothing. I got annoyed and asked him if he didn't have somewhere else to be several times. He'd just shrug. Anyway, for the entire week I was weirded out, but I did my best to avoid him. One time, we ran into each other at a cafe in the city center, which I found strange because what are the odds? The other guys in my dorm were actually super nice. We even went out to dinner one night. Then, on my very last day, I woke up too early and drifted back asleep. The next time I woke up, it was to him sitting by my bedside, caressing my arm and shoulder. I immediately sat straight up and asked him what he was doing. Even though it was only my arm he was touching, I felt disgusted. I always thought of myself as being someone who would scream and curse at someone in this situation, but I was simply dazed and shocked. He then went on to confess his love for me, how he wanted to meet up when we got back home. I'm from Germany too, and how I was just so special. When I pointed out that he couldn't possibly be in love with me because it had only been a week, he insisted that he just knew and that he wanted to show me affection. At that point, I was just nauseous. Of course, he was leaving that morning too and offered to go to the airport together. I insisted that I was taking the later bus, and he thankfully left it at that. I couldn't wait for him to just go and leave me alone. I'm glad I didn't run into him in the airport, but at some point I just burst into tears because it had been exhausting to ward off his advances all week, and then gently tell him I wasn't interested in him after he was fucking touching me while I was sleeping. I don't even know how I managed to remain so calm and polite to him, but who knows how he would have acted if I had been aggressive. With hindsight, I think I should have insisted on switching rooms, but up until that very last morning, nothing had actually happened, and I would tell myself that maybe the poor guy was just awkward and didn't mean it. After this, I never doubted my instincts again. Hello. I've wrote once before on Let's Not Meet, and today I was reading some submissions and it made me remember this event. At the time of the story, I was 14. As well as being younger, I had developed crippling anxiety and depression. With that being said, I was, and still am very vigilant about my surroundings. On this day, I had planned to stay the night at my friend's house. I had never stayed at her place before. We always stayed at mine. For you to understand the story, I need to explain the layout of this house. It was located on a sloped hill, and when you drove down the steep road, the first part of the house you would see was big and expansive. It looked like an old mansion. If you continued driving down, you'd be met with two semi-separated buildings. Both were small and run down. When I say small, I mean one of them was just a bedroom, and the other one was a bedroom with a small bathroom and kitchen. No door inside, just a piece of cloth to separate the bathroom entrance from the kitchen. My friend's room was the bedroom, and her mom lived in the other section with a bathroom kitchen. The landlord lived on the property in the main house, the big mansion. It was located in the middle of the woods, and when I say that, I don't mean it lightly. I mean all you could see was the expansive Australian forest. Australian rainforests are incredibly dense, and if you try to walk through it, you would most likely receive some sort of bite, whether it be a spider, ant, or leech. I'll cut to the first thing that happened. My friend and I had walked into her mom's flat. I forget why. I think we were either hungry or asking how to get reception. There was none. We called out for her mom. She was in the bathroom, and as we walked past the small window, I heard, "Yeah?" come from outside. I turned to my friend, and she looked at me the same way I was. We were confused. If her mom was in the bathroom that was right in front of us, why did we hear a male voice coming from right outside? We brushed this off as not trying to scare ourselves and continued having fun in my friend's room. For a little more context, the landlord used half of her room as storage and blocked off the section of the room with a tall shelf and divider. There is a huge glass sliding door in the front of her room, and in the block back section, there's another door. You couldn't get through that door unless you squeezed through a section outside. Now skipping forward a little to nighttime. My friend and I had just gone to the bathroom, so we had to slink out of her room and walk to her mom's flat. Her mom was fast asleep. We used the bathroom as quietly as possible and then exited. As we were making the small walk back to my friend's room, we saw something out in the woods. A pair of eyes. They were looking directly at us from behind a tree. We panicked and froze. I pulled out my phone to take a photo before we sprinted back into her room, locking the glass door behind us and drawing the curtains. It's not a reach to say that we were freaking out. We looked at the photo, and sure enough, when I brightened the image, there was what looked to be a man staring at us from the dark woods. We were extremely scared, but I called my mom, who was about an hour away, and she dismissed us. After a while, we relaxed and chalked it up to our imaginations playing tricks on us, and I pulled out my laptop to put on a movie. I forget which movie, but it was a cheesy rom-com. Maybe 20 to 30 minutes into the movie, We froze and paused it. Footsteps. There were footsteps crunching on dry leaves right outside our room. We listened in horror as the footsteps moved through the tight alley that led to the back door. We both moved slowly, standing on the bed and looking over the room divider. Our eyes were locked on the back door, and after a moment of complete silence, it turned. The doorknob wiggled slowly before it became faster. The door couldn't be opened as it was jammed against an object that was in the storage. Then it stopped. No more noise. We were crying, holding each other in our arms, trying to be as quiet as possible. Then the footsteps slowly crunched on the leaves in the opposite direction, back to the front of her room. We both didn't hesitate now, and I reached for my phone to call the police. After trying to explain the situation to the operator on the other end, in tears the whole time, she told us a unit was being dispatched and to stay where we were. As we were still crying and hyperventilating, we heard a phone ringing. It sounded like an old landline phone, one with a harsh and loud beeping. It was coming from the landlord's mansion. We waited silently, listening to the drawn-out ringing of his phone. After what felt like 2 minutes, it stopped, and we heard his voice talking to the operator. At that time, we both noticed another thing. Fingerprints on her window. These windows were slanted glass that you could open up with a lever. Whoever left those prints reached up, cupped their hand around the top of the glass, and dragged their fingers on the dust. It wasn't there before. Soon, the landlord walked to the mother's unit and told her that the police called him. He seemed extremely upset and told her that he made sure that they didn't send a unit. Her mother came into her room, and we explained the situation. Both the landlord and her mother didn't seem to be bothered by the fact that a man just tried to enter our room. I couldn't stay the night, and neither could my friend. We were both too scared to spend another minute there. I called my mom, and she came to get us at about 11 or 12. We dropped my friend back the next day, and when we got there, her mother told us something that I couldn't pass off as a coincidence. The night that this happened, it had been raining, and there was a strong wind, but not strong enough to do this. Next to her mother's unit, she had a pole that held beads and fairy lights. During the night, right after her and I were picked up, it had been knocked down. Keep in mind, this pole was literally embedded in cement and tied to other items with zip ties. There's no way it could have been the wind. That pole was sturdy. I'm still unsure of an explanation to all of this. It may have been her landlord. I'm not too sure. It could have also been her stepfather, who was pretty insane. Either way, to the man, or whoever it was, who tried to break into our room, please, let's not meet again. I went to a wedding of my friend Courtney about 2 days ago, and I still can't shake my mind over what happened. For context, I grew up in a very religious household and went to a church every Sunday, and Courtney is probably the only person from my old church that I still keep in contact with. The situation started at reception. Courtney was super excited to see me, and was definitely the only person who felt that way, judging from all the stares from the people from my old church. I sat down at my table and started playing something on my phone when some guy sat next to me. He said that the seating chart said that he was supposed to sit at my table, and introduced himself as the groom's friend, Anthony. He was pretty cute, so I spent a lot of time talking to him, and we really hit it off. He didn't seem to judge me for being an atheist, and seemed generally interested in me. When dancing started, they started to play Brown Eyed Girl, and he offered to dance with me. We danced together for most of the night until he left to go to the bathroom, and a little later I did too. When I came out, I saw that my purse wasn't at the table, which was weird because I swore I left it there. I was tired and thought I might have just left it in my car, so I went to the parking lot and into my car to look for it, and found it on the center console. I still thought it was weird because I really thought I had brought it in, but at that point it was pretty late in the night, so I didn't think too much of it. I danced some more and noticed Anthony was gone. I asked the groom, who said that he had gone home because he wasn't feeling good, Pretty soon, I felt sick too. I said bye to Courtney and went to my car. I put my keys in the ignition and looked behind me and saw something weird. It looked like something had dug down from behind my trunk. I took out my keys and looked back, and that's when I saw him. Anthony was crouched down in the trunk of my car. I started screaming and ran out, with him chasing after me. I went inside and told Courtney, who immediately told her husband, who walked me back to my car where Anthony was nowhere to be seen. Courtney's husband said he didn't see his car anywhere, so he probably left. I left and still felt sick to my stomach thinking about it. He could have easily gone home with me and killed me if I hadn't looked back. Courtney says she still feels terrible that she invited him and that she had no idea he would do that. I haven't stepped out of my house since because I'm worried that if I go out, he'll be waiting for me like he was before. Update: the last couple days have been kinda crazy, so I haven't had a chance to look, but thank you for all your advice that I wish I would have known about earlier. Unfortunately, my address was on my ID, and as I learned now, Anthony took photos of it. Anthony and the groom aren't exactly friends, but they know each other well enough for him to be invited. After the whole fiasco, the groom tried to text Anthony about it, but got no response. Anthony showed up at my job and was lurking around the parking lot before he ran off when he saw security. He left a note on my windshield that just says, "I'm watching." Security at my job has been notified about it, so hopefully I'm safe. I was told by other people that went to the wedding that he was introducing himself as my boyfriend and that he was planning on proposing. I'm currently trying to file a restraining order against him and feel horrified. He lives in my city and knows where I live, so I'm staying at my aunt's house as I speak. If anything else happens, I'll update. Back around 1991, I was 20 and newly single from my first love, unemployed and living with 2 friends. I started hanging out with one of my friends, church friends. Kind of like street church people, no denomination, basic Christian beliefs, nothing crazy at all. Anyways, there's about 5 of them sharing a pretty big apartment, and we would all hang there, and many people would drop by. Then, this one girl, Bernice, dropped by one day. A very pretty girl, by the way, but around 7 to 8 years older than I was. And when you're 20, that seems like a pretty significant age difference in my opinion. But whatever, irrelevant I suppose. Although she was pretty, I just wasn't immediately into her, is my point. Once she first saw me in the apartment though, she would not stop staring at me the entire time she was there. And she was very obvious about it, and everyone at the apartment could tell that she was acting really creepy towards me. Everyone was kind of looking at her, noticing that she was very fixated, and I remember them trying to talk to her to get her out of her trance, but she would barely acknowledge anyone else talking to her. There was so much tension in the 1 or 2 hours she was there. I was new amongst this group, and a shy person in general, so I didn't want to come out and ask, "What the fuck is going on?" as I'm sure many other people would have. So I just stayed in the corner and kept watching TV and tried not to look in her direction. Then, once she finally left, I could breathe again. They eventually admitted to me that she had a few psychological problems, is the best way I can remember their description. It was a long time ago, so I don't remember exactly what they said. After this revelation, her weird behavior made a smidge more sense, but it still didn't point to what this all had to do with her fixation towards me that night. Maybe it was because I was the new guy in the group that night, and she wasn't used to seeing anyone new. Who knows, I thought. Regardless, it was disturbing and made me anxious about seeing her again. So about a week later, I think, I drop in, and everyone is staring at me when I walk through the door. "What's going on?" I asked. "Bernice was here today." "And?" "She left a letter that she wrote for you here." She had written a 2 to 3 page letter to me that she left on the table for everyone else to read if they wanted to, which is why they were all acting freaked out when they told me about it. Anyways, they all told me it wasn't good. Basically, from what I can recall, She starts out quite rambling about when she first saw me, she thought I was Jesus. And then it goes on from there about, I'm not 100% sure if you are or not, but I think you are, and I love you with all my heart. Can't stop thinking about you. I want to be together, etc., etc., etc. I almost shit myself halfway through reading this thing. Everyone there was in suspense as they were watching me read it. Once I was done, and I was probably pale as a ghost, I seem to remember them telling me not to worry about it too much, and that they would make sure that she would not come around, especially if I was there. In a nice way, mind you. Then, being in a relatively small town, about a year more later on, I bump into her at a club. It was maybe 2 or 3 days before Christmas, and I said hello to be polite because she came right up to me. My heart was in my throat. I imagine I was probably sweating profusely in that instant. I remember her talking to me kind of normal for a few minutes. Normal chit chat about how I was and stuff. So I thought, okay, maybe she's come to her senses a little. I was hoping and praying. I let my guard down a little and started to relax. Within 5 minutes of the conversation, though, she drops a bomb and invites me to a Christmas supper at her mom's house, with just her and her mother. This may sound innocent and possibly a nice thing to do under normal circumstances, but not in these circumstances. This was way too much. I was out pretty damn quick. So this happened in June, and I thought I would share it here. I'm a 16-year-old female. I live in the US, but my parents are both from France, and every 2 years we travel there to see family. This year, prices were higher than usual, so after some searching, we found that it would be cheaper if I went on an earlier flight, had a layover in Chicago, and meet up with my parents in New York for our flight to Lyon. The reason why I would go alone and not the entire family is because my parents didn't want to have to deal with the 6-hour layover with my 6-year-old brother and 9-month-old sister. My parents made sure it was okay with me traveling alone, and I was actually excited because it would be the first time flying alone, so I was kind of looking forward to it. So eventually the trip came, and my flight to Chicago went pretty well, and for 2 hours after I landed it was fun walking around and exploring the airport without my family. Eventually I found a quiet corner without too many people around. After some time I noticed a guy with a beard looking at me, and he wasn't really doing anything else but looking at me and then looking at his phone. I was a little weirded out, but just thought he was lost in thought, and I just so happened to be in the same direction that he was looking in. So I decided to move. I was in the same area, but just in a different spot. After 5 minutes, I looked around and he was just watching me. So I decided to move into a different area. For 30 minutes or so, there was no sign of him, but after a few minutes, I looked up and I saw him sitting 50 feet away. But this time, he was with another guy who had dark curly hair. They were both looking at me and talking to each other. The curly-haired dude even pointed at me, and the bearded one nodded to him. I made eye contact with the bearded one, and he gave me this weird smile. At this point, I was freaked out, so I grabbed my stuff and decided to move to a completely different gate area. While walking down the long hallway, I turned around and saw the two walking maybe 75 feet behind me. They noticed me noticing them, and they picked up their pace. That was when I really started to feel scared, and I started looking around for a security guard or something. I saw a couple with a toddler looking at the arrival and departure screen, and I got an idea. I ran up to them and said, "Hi, these two guys are following me. Can you pretend to be my mom and dad?" The mom said, "Yes, of course, come here." She pulled me into a hug, which made me realize how much I was shaking. The two dudes passed us, with the curly-haired one looking at me. After they passed, the dad asked me if I was okay. I said yes and explained that the guys had been following me for almost an hour, maybe longer. The mom then asked, "What time is your flight, hon?" "It's at 8. Well, ours just got delayed until 9:30. Do you want to sit with us for a while? You can wait just in case they come back. Please, if you could, I replied. So that's what we did. We went to the gate and sat and talked. I told them why I was alone and where I was going. They explained that they're going to see the mom's parents in Texas. I got to play with their lovely daughter, and it was just a good time. The two guys came back around 45 minutes after we sat at the gate. They sat a few rows behind us and watched us for like 10 minutes before leaving for good. Once it was time for me to go, I thanked them profusely and gave them $50 as a thank you. I said goodbye to them and went off to New York. I'm so glad I found them, and I'll always be thankful. Looking back, I don't really know what the two guys could have done since I was in the airport, but regardless, to the two creepy dudes, let's not meet. My friend and I, both 21-year-old females, went to Applebee's for a few $1 margaritas, then went off to a park where she said she knew a spot. We go 20 minutes away to this park. We go down this path that takes us around 10 minutes to the Bay Area. We find a nice log to sit there and watch the sunset. As we were relaxing on the log, a family strolls by with their dog to hang out on the other side of the shore. A few minutes go by and a couple comes through and sets up. They eat a big pineapple with a knife. The sun sets, but it's still light out, and we didn't think about the walk back. Eventually, we go to head back, and it's dark. The wooded area we had to walk through is getting really dark. As we are walking, she gets her phone camera out, as it's pitch black at this point. We start talking about how creepy it was. I felt an uneasy feeling, that feeling you get, afraid that someone is behind you. Well, we're walking along, going across the bridge up a hill, and all of a sudden we hear loud footsteps on the bridge. I see light from what appeared to be his phone, going back and forth as if he was sprinting. We panicked. We start running, and I'm thinking his footsteps kind of sound like he was on a bike. I thought, we'll go up this steep hill on our left. No way this guy is following us, and no way they'll get up this hill on this bike. Turns out, there was no bike. We stopped running as we didn't hear anything. She flashes her light behind us, and there's a silhouette of a man jogging towards us, his body posture looking like he got tired from running. So we kept running and stopping to see if he was still chasing us, and then again we hear footsteps running towards us. We keep looking back while running to make sure that he's not right on us. At this point, my friend screamed, "Hey!" in a panicked voice, and he screamed back, "Hey!" Then after that said, "What, are you scared?" We keep running. She's on the phone with the police. We finally hit a paved road, nowhere near her car. When I took us up the hill, that was not the right path that we originally took. We knock on a house, lights are on, but no one answers. We start down the road to their neighbor. I look back and see a silhouette of a man walking behind the first person's house. He got up to the fence and creeped back into the darkness. That second neighbor helped us. His wife got us some water, and the police came and took us to her car. That was the most traumatic experience I think I've ever had. The intentions of the man felt sinister, and the way that he was yelling at us felt so uncanny. I hate this feeling I have, and I have so much questions that won't be answered. I can't get this one question out of my head. What if he caught up to us? So this actually happened about 2 hours ago. I, 26 female, and my boyfriend, 36 male, decided to go to the store to get oil. We have to go out 45 minutes just to get this out in a bad part of the city, but it's the only European store that actually has the stuff I grew up eating with. My family and I are from Ukraine, but I live in US, and it's difficult finding authentic places that have exactly what we had, and this is the only place I found that has it down to the exact brand. As we are driving, we are on a 3-lane road, which we need to get into one of those mid-section U-turn type of lanes. We get into the left turn lane, and a black car blitzes from the right lane through the middle lane to cut us off at the left lane, which my boyfriend and I were like, what the fuck? And then they stop at the green light for a U-turn. My boyfriend honks twice in a nice way, in case they were just on their phone, to let them know to go since it's green. They go forward and we go to the parking lot directly on our right to the store that we need to go to. The car that was in front of us, which is now in the far left lane, goes through another 2 lanes and drives onto the sidewalk to go into the parking lot where we're going into, and rides nearly on our bumper, pressing their horn the entire time we drove. My boyfriend eventually decided to stop a few feet further than the store instead of parking at it. At this point, I realized the car camera was not on. I can't remember the name in English. It's a camera that records in the front and back as you drive. I tapped it since it usually starts recording when it feels motion. It didn't turn on and we realized it's somehow disconnected to his car. As he's trying to get the camera plugged back into the car, the black car pulls up and I see 3 guys looking 18 to 20 in there. All 3 were African American. They rolled down the window and the driver reaches for something, about to take it out. And I'm screaming at my boyfriend, just drive, go, just go. And my boyfriend slammed on the gas pedal and we drove off, and the black car does too. My boyfriend suddenly began doing donuts in the parking lot to get their car off our back while I'm screaming, oh God, the police, call the police, I need to call the police. I managed to dial 911 and he's doing the last donut and then suddenly began driving out of the parking lot. The black car was still chasing us out as I finally got an answer. When the police asked where we were, I blanked out and shuddered in panic that we were currently being chased, and my boyfriend yelled out the road that we were passing. He used to do Uber for 7 years and knows every street name by heart. Those guys kept going after us until we were about 3 to 4 blocks away from the police station, and they probably realized where we were going and swerved to a random road to our left. At some point we got disconnected, but the officer called me right back and stayed with us until we pulled into the station. We explained what happened and the officer was nice. He offered to escort us back to the store and follow our car just in case the guys were still there. We showed the skid marks. The officer said, nice, as a joke. It was all good. He did his paperwork and we grabbed the sunflower oil I wanted and had my boyfriend try authentic Slavic ice cream for the first time, which he agrees is 100% better than American. We decided to cut our day short, thanked the officer, and went home. My boyfriend said he was amazed on how quickly I made all the right decisions and was surprised I even called the police because he's aware I have a history of being sexually assaulted by 2 on-duty officers 4 years ago, and I've been terrified to speak to officers since then. But I was so terrified of getting shot, and my only priority was to have the police over so my boyfriend is safe if something happens to him. I was so terrified, my chest hurt, and I'm so happy we are safe. I genuinely hope I never run into those 3 guys ever again. Let's not meet. I'm a female 23. I'm staying with my friend, also female 23, for a couple weeks in the town I grew up in. She works at a restaurant. Without giving away too much details about the location, it's a plaza with a river nearby, a movie theater, restaurants, and boutiques. We entered through the parking garage on the bottom floor, which has 3 stories, both elevators and stairs. This is important. Her shift was about 6 hours, so I decided to do some shopping, listen to music, and walk around before eating at the restaurant my friend works at. I was sitting at a bar on the corner alone, listening to music. A bigger man approached me. He had a security guard beanie on that was incredibly dirty and tattered up. He was muttering, and his eyes were barely open. What I got from the muttering was, "Are you? I like your... Is anyone sitting?" But keep in mind, it was incredibly muttered. I'm just guessing what he was trying to say. All of this was said while he was switching back and forth between looking in my eyes and staring at my chest. I told him multiple times I couldn't understand what he said. After a bit of back and forth, I put the headphone back around my neck and he left me alone. I told my friend about what just happened immediately. I tried to shake it off, hoping it was an isolated incident. If this was where the story ended, I wouldn't be writing this, unfortunately. But an hour or so later, I see someone approach the bar to my left out of the corner of my eye, and I felt their eyes on me. I didn't look, but somehow I knew it was him. My heart started beating really fast. I texted my friend and told her I felt really sketched out. I wanted to believe that I was misreading things and just letting my anxiety get the best of me, but I couldn't shake the feeling. 30 or so minutes later, she gets off. As we walked towards the parking garage stairs to get to our car, I saw him sitting on a bench waiting for me. The benches aren't super close to the elevator. They're closer to the restaurant, if anything. The second I spotted him, my blood ran cold. He saw us walking towards the stairs to the parking garage and started running towards us. I was face to face with him by the time we got to the top of the stairs. We booked it back to the restaurant and used the employee elevator to get to the car. An employee escorted us to the car as well. The employee told us there was a lot of cases of homeless people who walked around the restaurants, so I presumed he was homeless and just walking in and out of restaurants until he saw me. I'm incredibly thankful I trusted my gut and that I saw him. I don't know what would have happened to us if I hadn't seen him at first, but I don't want to find out. I was about 12. Me and my mom had gone to town 45 minutes out to do some shopping with her friends. I had a corn snake at the time, so I asked her if I could walk around the pet store one door down from the mini supermarket that she was shopping in to compare the prices of frozen mice with our local seller. She said sure, just come back as soon as I was done. The pet store had been there as long as I can remember. It had a very warehouse feel about it and was poorly lit by dim fluorescent lights too far above the floor. Before checking out the mice, I wanted to check the rest of the store, being the curious 12-year-old I was. As I was roaming around the aisles, I noticed you. You were in every single aisle I strolled down. Bald, middle-aged, a bit tubby, wearing dark blue plumber overalls over a white shirt. It was summer, and it was hot. I remember wondering why on earth you would come into a non-air-conditioned store in that. You carried a basket, but there was nothing in it. As you slowly stalked me down the aisle, I noticed the basket wasn't getting any more full. I started walking faster, taking random turns down different aisles to see if I was just being paranoid, but you were always 10 to 15 feet behind me. At some point, I finally thought I lost you. I power walked out of the pet store, and as soon as I cleared the doors, I sprinted down the street to the mini supermarket my mom was in. She hadn't even made it down the second aisle completely. I caught up to her. I immediately stripped off my bright pink hoodie and slung it in the cart, as well as ripping the hair tie out of my hair. I was smart for doing that, because when I looked back at the door, you were standing there, still carrying the basket from the pet store, and scanning the store for any sight of a 12-year-old girl in the bright pink hoodie and ponytail. When we left, I saw you in your van as you drove away, a plain white van, like something out of a true crime documentary or horror film. I think about you sometimes, and how if you caught me before I made it to the supermarket on that quiet Wednesday afternoon, what horrors could have been waiting for me in the back of the van. Guy in overalls who followed me out of the pet store without even putting down his basket. Even after 10 years, let's not ever meet again. Trigger warning for this story. Well, I recently found this subreddit and decided I would share a story with you all. This happened back in 2019 through 2021, and it still sticks with me today. I'll be using fake names for myself and the man that I'm talking about. Mary for me, and Dennis for him. When I was 13, I met someone on Discord. He was funny, smart, and exactly my type. He was 16, and we became close friends. After 3 months of getting to know him, I told him I had feelings for him. We ended up dating. We lived across the country from each other, and we're basically just friends, but whatever. So, as we are dating, he starts basically grooming me. As a kid who was always on the internet and exposed to Kick also, I was used to this behavior and thought it was fine. He had me send nude photos, gross messages, and pretty much worship him. I wasn't allowed to talk to other people on Discord without him there and stuff like that. He told me that he would kill himself if I ever left, or how he was always on drugs because he was so sad. He was also incredibly racist and thought Nazi jokes were okay. I'm so mad at myself for not realizing that this wasn't okay back then. He ends up cheating on me with his ex and tossed me out the door. Didn't talk to me anymore and said that we shouldn't talk anymore because we weren't together. Here's where it gets bad. Note, this happened over 5 years ago, and I have a spotty memory of this time. New accounts pop up in the server we met on and start saying horrible things about me. Mary is a fat whale. Mary is an N-word, and more things of the sort. The account have names like Jerry Touches Kids or Big Fat Whale, etc. I had gotten in trouble with the server owners because it was my fault that people were saying bad things, as if I told them to spam things about me or something. The accounts also started to message me, telling me to kill myself, die, how I'm a whale, a whore, and more. I ended up blocking every single account and moving on with my life. Great, it was over with. Or so I thought it was. Fast forward a year to late summer 2019, everything starts up again. The messages, him telling people lies and rumors, and direct threats. I was sent unsolicited porn, death threats, slurs, and that I should kill myself because no one would care. At this point in time, I had undiagnosed depression and anxiety. Almost did kill myself. I went to therapy and tried to get over it. In 2020, right before quarantine happened, I got a boyfriend. I was very happy and came back out of my shell. He and I would play games on Discord together, and I joined more servers. Around 2 months later, I got another message. Someone had messaged me named Lily. It was a normal profile, and we were in a server together, so I thought nothing of it. She then had messaged me how I was, and I had never talked to her before, so I was confused. She said we had a long conversation about mental health the day before, so she wanted to make sure I was alright. I asked her who she was and what she was talking about, and she said something like, "Oh, you told me about this. You said you take medicine for schizophrenia, and you must have missed a dose. Are you off your meds?" I was extremely confused and scared because I had never talked to this person, and certainly did not have schizophrenia. After about 10 minutes of this charade, I realized it was Dennis. I blocked the account and didn't accept new friend requests. The next day, I got hundreds of messages with the same contents I previously mentioned, the threats, porn, etc. I was terrified. I asked my boyfriend for help. He told me to make a new account and not friend any of the other mutual friends so he wouldn't be able to find me. I did, which cost an affiliated Twitch account that I spent years building. I changed all my accounts, deleted most, and made new ones. The messages found me again. I have no idea how. These new accounts weren't even tied to me. I got fed up and had asked a mutual friend I thought I could trust some personal information about Dennis to go to the police and get a possible restraining order or something. I didn't totally know how the police handled these issues. Months go by and nothing, until fall of 2021, in which Dennis messages me, calling me a stupid bitch and how he'll always find me, how I'm so fat and dumb and no one loves me. I isolated myself and deleted more accounts. I was never able to go to the police about this because I had no information like full name or address, It's been 2 years, and every day I worry if he lives near me, if he knows where I live, or go to school. I recently found out that he has a website and made YouTube videos. He has made YouTube videos referencing me in 2022. His copyright claim is something like Mary is a Fat Whale, Inc. I can't find it anymore. It was hell, and I'm still worried every day that he'll find me. I believe he has a Reddit account and could find this. I hope we don't ever meet again, Dennis. I wish you the worst. During summer 2022, my brother, 22, began dating his girlfriend, 23, and bringing her around my parents' house where I lived at the time. We'll call her Faye. She would attend holiday dinners, birthdays, things like that. Every time Faye came over, she started to look a little bit more like me, started wearing similar clothes and hairstyles, which previously we had completely different styles and aesthetics. My parents and I noticed it and made a few jokes about it between the three of us, but we didn't think too much of it. Maybe she just thought my style was cool, right? At the time, I had platinum hair with the colors pink, blue, and purple in it. Faye began asking me for tips on how to dye her hair like mine, since I do mine at home. I thought it was innocent, so I gave her some instructions and told her what product I used. So the next time I saw Faye, her hair was identical to mine, and I couldn't be annoyed about it because, I gave her the advice. I have a necklace that I have worn every single day since I was 15. It's a choker with my name on it. Faye got the same exact necklace, but with her name on it. That was once again a little strange to me, but like everything else, I just brushed it off. But when she got fake blue contacts to match my eyes, that's when I seriously became unsettled by her. I did not have a friendship with her, so this was very weird behavior to me. She actually had me blocked on all social medias, which once again, I never understood. I did not know this person, nor why she would resent me for being her partner's sister. I wasn't even close with him. I actually avoided my brother unless he was at my parents' house, so her attitude towards me was just unexplainable. Even my parents were becoming weirded out by her actions. To this day, we still don't have an answer to why she was doing all this. In April 2023, my brother breaks up with Faye and kicks her out of their apartment. I don't know the details on why this happened. All I know about that situation is it's always been toxic between the two of them. Constant fighting and battling substance abuse. They were just messy from the start. 2 days after getting kicked out, Faye starts telling my brother that she's pregnant with his child. Both my brother and Faye are so young, and both have a history with substance abuse, benzos, and my brother was still actively using them at the time, so the pregnancy news horrified my family. We knew we wouldn't be stable enough to raise a child, so immediately we knew this was going to be something we would all end up pitching in to help with. At the time, my brother had a DUI, no car, in between jobs, and in and out of a mental hospital. Clearly, bringing a kid into this world was really going to cause turmoil for our family. My parents had purchased Plan B for the two of them more times than I can count, so at the end of the day, they were being irresponsible. So, Faye's pregnant with my brother's kid and is acting super strange towards me. I thought all of this was weird, but overall, I just felt horrible for the baby that was going to be brought into it. But like I said, up until this point, I wasn't overly concerned. This was all just petty drama. One night, I confided in a close friend and tell her what's going on with my brother and that I was going to become an aunt soon. My friend asked to see pictures of Faye, so we pulled up her Facebook profile. That's when I found out everything that she had been doing. Faye stole several items from my room, including clothes, blankets, sunglasses, perfumes, probably other stuff that I haven't even noticed yet. She had copied every single Spotify playlist that I made with the same titles, same songs, in the same order. She had the exact same room setup as me, with the same exact posters and tapestries, and even paintings that my grandmother painted. Faye actually painted identical ones. How much time did she have on her hands to do all of this shit? At this point, I was scared of her. she had copied everything about me to a T. My hair, my eyes, my outfits, my room, music. What the fuck? I'm a nail artist. She even started copying the exact sets of nails I was doing. I can't even imagine how much time she spent trying to be like me. It's fucking horrifying to think about. Now backtracking to July 2023. The place I worked received an email containing a few TikTok videos of me on Molly, acid, from back when I was in an active addiction, freshly 18, and posting recklessly on a viral account. I've been sober for 2 years now. In that email, the person was essentially trying to get me fired from my job for having a history of substance abuse. I was heartbroken. My boss had no idea about my history with substances, so not only was that embarrassing, but I feared losing my job. I couldn't imagine who would have sent this email. I don't have enemies or people out to get me, and I had no idea where to even begin as far as figuring out who was trying to sabotage me. Months later, I knew it was Faye. There's nobody else it could have been. Along with the email to my work, I received a text message from an unknown, untraceable phone number. It basically said, "I emailed some pretty damning videos of you to your work. If you get fired, I'm sure your parents will take care of you." Which leads me to believe that her motive behind all of this is to tear my family apart, cause problems between my parents and I, so that she could weasel her way in or something. I really just don't know. What else could she be trying to gain from doing all this? So that's the beef of it, basically. I just want to know if there's anything I can do other than staying silent on social medias. Faye is able to view my accounts through fake accounts that she has created. I'm honestly convinced sometimes that she put a camera in my room or tapped my phone. This whole thing has made me extremely paranoid. I have proof of everything she's copied, stolen from me. I just don't know if there's anything I could do with it. I was wondering if anyone had any ideas other than moving several states away and changing my entire identity to escape this person. So recently, I've had a few encounters with a delivery guy. First one, he asked me, "Are you Amy Duncan from 323 Citrus Avenue? You moved, huh?" All while smiling creepy. I thought he was just a delivery guy trying to do small talk, so I brushed him off. I am living alone, so I thought I was just overthinking by getting creeped out. Then I realized, after I thought about it, he was my neighbor from my previous address. He struck up a conversation with me saying he knows one of my friends. I don't like talking to strangers, so I didn't talk to him for long. But it stayed with me because I felt uncomfortable with him. I felt like he was dangerous. After that, I was going out and saw him again delivering to my neighbor. I ignored him, trying to walk by. He saw me and recognized me, even though I was wearing a mask, and asked the same questions again. After that, since I don't go out much, I didn't see him that often. There was this one time, he was just standing in front of my neighbor's house, but I just walked by. Then I saw him in my Facebook friend request, and I just ignored him, but I was obviously creeped out. I told my friend. At first my friend said that she doesn't know anyone with that name, but his last name made him recognize him as a son of a family friend. They never talked. His family didn't know that he was working as a delivery guy, and he was laid off because he became obsessed with his boss, which was older than his mom. I also lost my keys, so I asked my landlord for a replacement. I didn't think much of it until I got home to my door being open. Obviously, I was cautious, but there was no one in my apartment, so I sighed in relief, thinking maybe I left it open. I work night shift, so sometimes my mind is all over the place. Now that I'm thinking about it, I overlooked a lot of things, and I'm thinking about installing CCTV in the front of my apartment. I am scared though, because he knows my address. Update. My friend told me to report him to the police, but I'm too scared because they might just let him go, and then they'll take revenge on me. She also told me that he might be doing drugs, as told by his family, since he's acting suspicious. The most I can do right now is change my locks, and install CCTV in front. Wish me luck, guys. Another update. Thank you. I'm overwhelmed by you guys worrying about me. So far, I haven't encountered him anymore, though I don't really go out that much. I sent my delivery name to my boyfriend's, maybe because his family knew and talked to him. I haven't caught anything strange around my house either. I think I'm in the safe zone now. I'm gonna move to a different city in a few months, probably with my dog. My boyfriend is another problem since he can't move because his parents won't let him. If only he was as worried about me as you guys are. Maybe I'll just get another boyfriend. To give context, I used to be a 911 dispatcher for a small city. We dispatched all law, fire, EMS for the entire county, and within this county were multiple law agencies. I had been there for about 3 months or so when I met him. Let's call him Jake. Jake had recently transferred from a big department in California and landed himself randomly at our department. It didn't make much sense as to why he left California in the first place, but he always insisted that it was just time for him to move on to a smaller and less dangerous department. Him and I quickly became close and would chat almost every day after I got off shift. Within a few months, it became apparent that we both liked each other, and our flirting progressed into something more serious. Fast forward a few months later. It turns out that he was doing some inappropriate things to photos and videos of me while he was actively on duty. This and a few other things he had kept hidden on duty led to him losing his license and leaving. During the process of his termination, his sergeant had suggested I get a protective order against him, as he made threatening comments previously towards me, such as, "You better be telling the truth. I'll find out Tuesday if you're lying to me," etc. I had begun to fill out the paperwork and was told I had a temporary protective order on him in the meantime. But don't think I ever did. About 2 weeks after his termination, he calls me to catch up. The entire call is like an old friend to an old friend. "What are you doing for work? Do you have a boyfriend now?" But progressively turns more personal. "When does your shift end? What do you drive?" Being 18 and naive, I treated him like I always had, answering his questions. I contacted his old department afterwards, as the sergeant told me to let him know if I was ever contacted again. But they turned me away pretty quickly and didn't want anything to do with it. With that, I blocked Jake. Roughly a month later, I get a call from a new number, and it's Jake. Once again, he wants to meet up and catch up. But this time, he so casually goes on about this new house he wanted to buy in my neighborhood, knowing it's my neighborhood. I never told him where I lived in town, let alone what specific neighborhood. During this call, he progressively got more aggressive as well, making statements such as, "If I knew I was getting it canned, I should have just had my way with you." He half-heartedly joked about getting a hotel room just for me, and that was that. A few days later, he FaceTimed me, and once again came off simply as wanting to catch up, as he was sick. Midway through our seemingly normal conversation, he makes it apparent that he's touching himself the entire time. Keep in mind, nothing suggestive was mentioned, and our conversation at this point was about his new dog. I blocked him once again, but he tried to follow my social media, and now I've started to see him in my area. Last I knew, he lived about 30 to 45 minutes in the opposite direction from me. Am I reading too much into this, or should I generally consider this stalking? I'm a female, 20. When I was younger, maybe 13 or 14, I was walking to town with my mother. I lived in a smallish town in England. It was a quick walk, 15 minutes, but about 5 minutes after leaving the house, I had one of the most unsettling encounters ever. Whilst walking, there was this man approaching us. Nothing weird at this point. I thought he would walk past us like everyone else. However, This random man leaned in towards me as he was walking past and whispered something to me. I remember it being creepy, somewhere along the lines of him knowing where I lived. It was subtle and happened quickly. I was shocked, especially since my mom was right next to me. Bold move from a creepy guy. I recall the man being possibly in his late 20s, kind of scruffy looking, a little chubby, with longish brown hair and a beard, but I knew I had never seen him before this point. I waited a few seconds for us to distance ourselves from the stranger, then turned to my mom, completely freaked out, and quietly asked if she had heard what the guy said to me. She said she didn't. I thought maybe I misinterpreted the situation or misheard him. We kind of brushed it off and continued our day. I felt uneasy, but tried not to think about it. The rest of the day was fairly normal until the morning after, when my dad was talking to our neighbor. The neighbor told my dad during the early hours of the morning there was a man lurking right outside our houses for some time, hovering around my dad's and neighbor's car. Now this is really weird because we live in a kind of closed off area. The only people we see outside our homes are neighbors, but even they wouldn't come right up to our doors, especially not at like 2 or 3 in the morning. Even delivery drivers can't find our house most of the time because we're hidden away. This has never happened before and never happened again after this, at least to our knowledge. Of course, you can imagine how absolutely terrified I was to hear this. I explained to my dad what had happened the day before and reminded my mom, kind of a "I told you so" moment. I felt so scared to be in my own home. I remember calling a friend talking about the situation. We researched about what we could do, but there wasn't really any action we could take. Just had to be observant and cautious, I guess. I can't remember much about what happened after that, but I never saw that man again. The whole situation creeps me out, and it doesn't make sense. The man outside my house wasn't confirmed to be the same man that walked past us earlier, as it was too dark to make out any discernible features, but it sure is an amazing coincidence if so. Never knew where to talk about this experience, but I figured it belongs here. I'd love to hear your opinions and theories. When I was 18 and newly graduated, I ran into some issues with my attempts to enroll in college and also had a hard time finding a job in my area in the meantime, which led me to having to sign on at a job center. They determined that I was too shy to succeed in interviews and placed me in a group that was supposed to teach me interview skills in order to fix that. The group ended up ultimately being a complete waste of time. I honestly think they just put me in the wrong group or just needed an extra member and made an excuse to throw me in there to make the numbers. But that's not really relevant to my story. And the other group members didn't do much to help my shyness, since they were all men who were at least 4 decades older than me and obviously didn't share any of my interests. Unfortunately, I ended up gaining the attention of one of the members I wanted nothing to do with. I don't actually remember the man's name at this point, but I think it's something generic like John, so that's what I'll call him. John immediately got off on the wrong foot with the rest of the group when he interrupted the instructor during our introduction to the course to complain that him being there was useless, since he will be retiring in a few years anyways, and no one would want to hire someone who spent over 10 years in prison. When that didn't get him the reaction he wanted, I assumed the rest of the group thought he was just attention seeking, and the instructor had heard similar things before from people who weren't happy about being in that course. He waited until we had been given paperwork to complete, and then turned to the man next to him and loudly explained that the prison sentence was for beating his ex-wife, but that she was a lying bitch and he never put his hand on her, that she didn't even have any bruises on her at the trial or evidence of bruises or other injuries before that either. But because she was a woman, the judge automatically believed her and sent him to jail. This immediately set me on edge. I'm not an expert when it comes to the law, but I do watch a lot of true crime channels on YouTube, and I never heard of a sentence for over 10 years for a single beating that supposedly never happened and didn't leave visible injuries. Either John was lying and had severely beat his wife to the point of putting her in the hospital, or he's arrested for other charges and was covering up what he actually went to prison for. I immediately decided I wanted nothing to do with him, regardless of which one it was, and would avoid interacting with him as much as possible outside of polite hellos and passing him things if asked. Like I said before, I didn't really interact much with the other members of the group because of their ages. I attended the first half of the meeting in the morning, spent the dinner break in the library while the men snuck off to a pub, and then went home immediately after the second half was over. No one ever asked me how I spent my breaks, and since the pub and library were in the opposite directions from each other and couldn't be seen from the front of the building that the group met in because of the way the streets were arranged, there should be no way for any of them knowing where I had been, which made what happened next even more worrying. About halfway through the course, there was a day where I had bumped into a friend on my dinner break and decided to put off visiting the library until the course was over for the day and catch up with them instead. I spent at least a quarter of an hour there before heading to a desk to check out my books and ended up being drawn into a conversation by the librarian who had noticed I was checking out books related to a franchise he also enjoyed and that was getting a new movie the next year. There were only a handful of other people in the library, so I didn't see anything wrong with talking to a friendly man around my age who shared my interests after 8 hours of boredom and paperwork. We had been talking for 15 minutes when he suddenly glanced over my shoulder, looking confused and concerned, and was just opening his mouth to say something when someone grabbed me by my shoulders. My friends and family know that I hate having my shoulders touched without warning and would have never done that to me, so I immediately knew that whoever was touching me was a stranger and knocked their hand away while turning around and backing up into the librarian's desk. It was John. He was standing directly behind me with a huge smile on his face, and as soon as I turned around, he made a joke about knowing that he would find me there and how I practically lived there before chattering at me as if we were close friends. I was just completely confused. It was obvious that he hadn't just coincidentally bumped into me from the way that he was talking, but John had been kept behind while the group was heading out because he had filled out his paperwork incorrectly. And as I mentioned before, you can't see the library from the building, so he shouldn't have had any way of seeing where I had gone. It had almost been a half an hour since I left the building, so if he had left not long after me and had just seen me go in while walking in the same direction, he would have came inside by then. The only way it made sense for him to know where to look for me and joke that I practically lived in there would be that he somehow learned I was going to the library during dinner breaks, known that I hadn't gone that day, and guessed that I would go after the meeting instead. What made that even stranger than it already was is the fact that John never showed any interest in me during the group sessions and mostly ignored me the way I ignored him unless we were forced to interact for whatever reason. So why was he following me into another building to start a conversation out of nowhere and acting like we were close? While John was still talking, the librarian leaned in to ask me if I knew the man because he obviously saw my negative reaction by being touched by John. And when I briefly explained the situation to him, he asked John politely to please leave me alone or leave the building. John refused and tried to tell the man that we were friends, completely ignoring the fact that I had just said we weren't and how ridiculous it would be to claim that an 18-year-old girl and a 50 to 60-year-old man were friends in the first place. When the librarian asked again, and I outright told him that harassing other customers wasn't acceptable and he would be removed from the building if he refused to leave me alone. John smiled and agreed to leave in a tone you use when humoring a child before walking out and very obviously stationed himself right outside the doors, waiting for me to leave too. The librarian was clearly concerned and asked for the full story of what was going on, and I told him, including my suspicions that John had been following me around without my knowledge to know that I would be there in the first place. He suggested I stay in the library until his break so he could walk me to the bus stop to make sure John left me alone. But it wouldn't be for several hours, and if I had waited, I wouldn't have gotten home in time to change and head to another meeting I had later in that evening. So he asked me to at least come in the next time I was there, to let him know I was safe, and he reluctantly watched me leave. John immediately stepped into my personal space when I got outside, jokingly asking me what the librarian's problem was, and still acting like we were friends. I tried to walk around him without answering him and head to the bus station to go home, but he grabbed me by my arm and reminded me that there was a closer stop for our bus. When I told him that we aren't going on the same bus because I'd never seen him on the same one as me, he corrected me and said that we both need number 3 and told me where he lived, which was in fact on the same bus route as me. Although I was still tempted to walk away and go to the station instead, and possibly sneakily get on a different bus and just walk the rest of the way home, it was very clear to me that he was going to follow me if I did, because he still had a hold of my arm, refusing to let go when I tried to pull away. And there were several dark alleys on the way that I had no intention of going anywhere near while in his company. When I agreed to go to the closer stop, he let go of me and started walking at my side, chattering like we were good friends again. John kept walking when we reached the stop, which was odd, but I was hoping that the lack of response to anything he said made him give up and decide to leave me alone, or that he had mixed up that stop with one further along and I could run while his back was turned. No luck. As soon as he realized I wasn't following him anymore, John came back, frowning as if he was confused and asking me, "I thought we were going to go get coffee together." Shocked, I told him blatantly no. He kept pushing, trying to convince me that I had agreed to go with him, and when that didn't work, he switched tactics and claimed I had mentioned while leaving the classroom that I wanted some coffee, so he thought we could go together. That was an obvious lie too, since I don't drink coffee, and I told him so. John's only answer was to say I didn't have to get coffee and kept pushing me to go to the cafe with him. I firmly told him no, and apparently he took that as me not wanting to drink in public because he attempted to invite me to his flat. If that wasn't weird enough, he started telling me that if there was a naked girl on the couch when we got there, I'm not to worry because that's his 18-year-old daughter. Yeah, because an 18-year-old girl is definitely going to lounge around naked on her father's furniture in front of him, right? Other people at the stop were staring at us now. I took the opportunity to point out that I was also 18 and firmly tell John that I don't want to go with him to his flat and to leave me alone. He completely ignored that last part and tried to claim that I was lying about my age and that I was at least 29, when most people at that time still mistook me for being in my early teens at first glance. The bus arrived at that moment and I got on as quickly as possible, thinking that I would be safe there and the driver would throw him off if need be. No. When I sat down on the aisle seat to stop John from sitting next to me, he physically shoved me across the seat, pinning me against the window to the point I could barely move, and pressing his knees up against the seat in front of him to make sure I had no room to get past him unless he allowed it. The only way for me to get out would have involved me straddling his lap, since the seat in front of us were occupied. I loudly told him to move and leave me alone, but he ignored me. He continued trying to convince me to come back to his flat. Although people gave me uncomfortable looks, when I tried to make eye contact with some of the men in hopes that they would help, they would look away as if they hadn't noticed or suddenly become very interested in their phones. I spent the ride huddled up against the window trying to touch him as little as possible, and was ignored again when I shouted for him to stop touching me, because he kept putting his hands on my thigh as high up as he could without directly groping me. No one did anything about it, but he stopped touching me after that. He had apparently also given up on convincing me to go back to his flat that day. But when we were coming up to my apartment block, he pointed it out to me, physically turning my face when I refused to look, told me his apartment number and tried to give me a kiss goodbye on the cheek, which I dodged, before getting off the bus and knocking on the opposite window to try to get my attention so he could wave at me. When the bus set off again, several people started loudly talking about how disgusting he was, and that men like him should be reported, while refusing to look in my direction where I sat shaking and seething in my seat. And other than the awkward, "So, are you alright?" from the bus driver just as I was about to step off the bus. No one bothered to check on me. As soon as I got home, I sent an email to the instructor telling her I wanted to switch groups and never see that man, explaining what he had done. She read it but ignored it for an entire week until I sent a follow-up, threatening to get police involved if they forced me to interact with that man again. Their solution was to tell me that I could leave the course early instead, essentially kicking me out as if I was the problem. I bumped into that man not long afterwards, and he tried to ask me why I hadn't been attending that group anymore, admitting that he asked the instructor but they had refused to tell him. But I managed to get away and lose him in the crowd. I've seen him a few more times passing in the years since, but fortunately he has never noticed me or approached me again, and I hope it stays that way. As I was walking home from work last night, about halfway to my house, a disheveled man who looked like he was either homeless or extremely down on his luck crossed paths with me from the other side of the sidewalk. He had initially been walking in the opposite direction, but as soon as he saw me, he immediately turned around and started following me. He began rambling incoherently and aggressively, and his words were so slurred that I hardly understood a thing he said. All I could make out was something about a care package and look at you. It was obvious that the man was under the influence of multiple substances. I quickened my pace and tried to avoid eye contact with this man, and he was getting agitated that I wasn't paying attention to him. When my walking speed got too quick for his inebriated stumbling to keep up with, he stopped talking and instead just began trying to follow me. I kept looking over my shoulder at him, and every time I saw him, he would either stop or try to duck behind a bush. Finally, I started outright sprinting and looking for a spot that I could hide myself. I came up to my local mosque and tried to sneak around the corner into the parking lot where there was a tree that I hid behind. While hiding there, I frantically dialed 911. I told them that a strange man was displaying unstable behavior and was trying to follow me, and described my location, myself, and then the man to them. The dispatcher assured me that officers were on the way, but while I was waiting for them, I saw a figure heading up the sidewalk in front of the parking lot I was hiding in. Panic immediately filled me until the passerby was close enough where I could see that it wasn't the same man who had just bothered me, and they turned out to be harmless. Mere moments after this, the cops arrived to where I was, pulled up next to the tree, and motioned for me to come over and talk to them. The officer driving the vehicle asked me standard questions, a description of the incident, where I was when it happened, etc. While we were talking, he spotted a man in another parking lot down the street, not too far from where I first encountered the creep. He asked me if that was a man I had encountered, and it was hard to tell between the darkness and the distance, but I was pretty sure it was, and it appeared that an officer got out to talk to the man. The officer I had been talking to asked me how far from my house I was, and I told him that I was pretty close to my street at this point. He assured me that it should be safe to walk the rest of the way home, and that they had other cop cars patrolling the area. I thanked him and finished walking home without further incident, thank God. Shortly after I got home, I saw that I got a text from my boyfriend that read, "Are you okay?" The text had been sent around the same time the incident was occurring, as if he could sense that I was in a fearful situation. I replied back to him, telling him what happened. He told me that he had gotten yelled at by a homeless man earlier too. I described the creep I encountered to him, and asked him if he thought it was the same guy. He said he didn't think so. We also had a brief phone call to make sure each other was okay. I let him know that I was home safe, and he told me that he was in a vehicle with the group, so he was safe too. I don't know what the cops ended up doing about the man, but I hope he stays as far away from me as possible. I'm a 31-year-old female. When I was 16, I was in choir at my high school that I performed for a lot of different events around town. One of them was to sing at the middle school sporting events. The middle school in my hometown is just about a half mile away from my childhood home, so whenever we had events there, I walked. This one I think it was in November. We had to sing at a basketball game, and it was obviously dark when I was able to leave. Normally, I wasn't allowed to walk home at night, but for choir, I was given permission unless I felt unsafe. But there wasn't any reason for me to be creeped out at first, so I started my walk. Just down from the middle school is a stretch of road with almost no streetlights that has always creeped me out when walking. I crossed quickly and had a fast pace going, as I am a naturally paranoid human. About 2 minutes into the dark zone, I heard rapid footsteps behind me. I at first figured it was a jogger, but they made no attempt to pass me, and just stayed a comfortable 10-foot distance. They began whistling a jaunty tune, which at first I thought was fun. At this point, I wasn't super scared, perhaps because of the happy whistling tune, but I noticed the footsteps began to speed up. There were no cars on the road, and given the lack of light, when I turned around, all I could see was a silhouette shrouded in darkness. At that realization, I quickened my pace to barely under a run. The whistling continued, getting more breathless as this person began to run after me. I looked back and saw a dark figure coming at me full speed, and in terror, began running frantically as well. I will never forget those last moments running through my dark subdivision, hearing his whistling and footsteps getting closer and closer. This person followed me to my door. I ran inside and locked the front, checked all the doors, and went upstairs to my bedroom. From the window, I could still see his silhouette and could hear him whistling. I slept with a knife that night. When I was little, I lived in an apartment complex that consisted of 2 buildings with a slight gap in between them. It was only about 50 feet, so I'd often walk there by myself to visit my mom's best friend in the other building. The apartments were surrounded by thick woods that had blackberry brambles, so thick that you couldn't stick your hand in without getting torn up by the thorns. This is relevant later. One afternoon, I went to my mother's best friend's apartment to deliver Girl Scout cookies, and stayed later than I meant to because I was fascinated by her aquariums. It started to get dark by the time I was leaving, but I wasn't scared because the buildings were so close. I had taken about 10 steps when my inner voice started screaming. I'm older now, so I recognize what it was, but at the time, it was like I was being overwhelmed with an intense desire to poop. I looked into the woods across the parking lot and saw an intense red glow from someone taking a drag from a cigarette. I turned back towards the apartment, trying to pretend that I hadn't seen anything. But then I heard the sound of something large moving in the woods. I turned my head for just a moment and there's this large, scary looking man starting to run at me. I took off, screaming bloody murder, knowing that I was less than 50 feet away from the safety of my apartment. I could hear his feet slapping the pavement behind me, and he was gaining on me. I was nearly on my porch steps when my uncle, who lived next door, opened his door to see why I was screaming bloody murder. I collapsed into his arms screaming about the man chasing me from the woods, but by the time my uncle opened his door, the man was gone. At first, they didn't believe me because there had been nobody there, but I was so hysterical they decided to check it out. They noticed an area had been disturbed in the blackberry brambles. They were so thick that my uncle had to use a machete to cut through them. About 2 feet into the area of disturbance, there was a small clearing with a pile of cigarette butts where the man had been standing, watching, and waiting for me. The man chasing me had disappeared, so they think he ran between the buildings when I started to get close to the apartment door. So about a week after this incident, my mother's boyfriend Russ and I were riding dirt bikes through the woods by our apartment. There was a retainer pond that we liked to fish at, so we headed out there that day to see if we could catch anything. We discovered a campsite on the trail that hadn't been there a few weeks prior, and Russ decided to check it out. It was just a tent, cooler, a fire pit, and trash strewn everywhere. The trash part really bugged Russ because we believe in the leave it better than you found it principle, and I could tell he was pissed. As we approached the tent, he announced himself to see if anyone was in there, and when they didn't respond, he pulled back the zipper from the tent. After looking inside for a moment, he ordered me to back up, but the damage had already been done since I got a clear look at what was inside the tent. Attached to the walls and littered in the floor was some of the most brutal and sadistic adult magazine content anyone could imagine, and the worst part of it was the graffiti that had been added after the fact. Most of the models had their eyes scratched out, lines across their throat like it's been cut, and their blood drawn and dripping out of their orifices. It's been over 30 years since this happened, and the image is still splashed bright upon my memory. There was a torn sleeping pad surrounded by used condoms, and the pad looked like it had substantial stains that could have been blood. Russ stood there in silence for a minute, then told me to get on my bike because we were going home. When we got home, he called the sheriff, then led them out to the torture tent in the woods. They destroyed the campsite, and it was never spoken of again. I never put two and two together as a child, but as I get older, when I thought about it, I realized how unbelievably lucky I am. I worked overnights at a 24-hour diner. You could probably guess what company. I'm used to weird people and odd things happening, but tonight was too much. Their restaurant backs up to a field that has a tree line, and my cook and I went outside to smoke. We could hear someone yelling in the distance, but we get a lot of homeless people that come through this town that usually are harmless, so we just shrugged it off as weird and went back inside. Later, I came out again to smoke and throw some trash in the dumpster that's next to the field. I was stupid to go over there, but I hadn't heard him again. As I'm walking to the dumpster, I hear, "Hey, come here." It was much closer than when we heard the man yelling the first time. I went inside and got my coworker, who owns a car with a spotlight on it. We shined it into the field, which again, not smart, and we admit that, but we really couldn't see where he was. But he kept saying, "Hey girl, come here." I called the cops at this point because it was just too fucking weird. As I get off the phone with them, he comes walking out of the field. He's an older man wearing a tan trench coat, and my coworker and a customer run back inside because this dude is hauling ass across the parking lot. He started to come towards the door, and I called the cops again. My cook cut him off and told him he needed to go. The man was acting erratically, yelling at the cook and said, "I'll end your life the next time I see you, fucker." He kept moving his jacket by his waist like he was fishing for a weapon, but I couldn't see anything from inside. The cops come and get him down on the road, and an officer came basically saying that the guy is homeless and not mentally stable. No shit. We told him everything that happened, and my cook pressed charges on him. The officer told us that there wasn't anything they could do, and he wouldn't give her his name, so they let him go. Basically ended with, "Oh, by the way, he's known to carry a knife in his waistband. Call us if you need us. Bye." He came back, again hauling ass across the neighboring parking lot and back into the field. We could hear him screaming, "Hey, come here," again and again. We got busy when the bars closed and haven't heard him yelling since, but I know he's still back there because I caught him sleeping behind the dumpster before. My manager comes in the morning, and I'm going to try to get her to let me take pictures of him off the security tapes so I can warn the other third shift workers. The field that he's camping out also backs up to a middle school, but the cops said, again, there's nothing they could do. Hopefully he moves on and leaves us alone, or the cops can catch him on something where no one gets hurt. Leaving my friend's house, I accidentally backed into a brick mailbox. My bike rack hit the mailbox, so my car was okay, but I completely demolished the mailbox. No big deal, right? That's why we have insurance, right? I went to my neighbor and told him what happened and gave them my insurance, phone number, and name. All I got was his first name. From the get-go, this dude was creepy. He was hitting on me, trying to date me, specifically trying to feed me. I'm attending out-of-state college and my parents are divorced. I left. On my drive to my mom's, the guy I backed into, Robert, began to text and call me. He was insistent that it was better for both of us to just pay out of pocket for the mailbox, sending me links to companies that would fix it for about $500 and demanding I go on a date with him so I could give him the cash for the repair and he could feed me. I don't know what his deal with food was. I declined everything and started to get annoyed by his constant calls and texts. Finally, after 2 days of it, with my response only, "Please contact my insurance," I sent him a text saying that he was harassing me. I blocked him. He made a new number and threatened to report it as a hit and run to the police. I'm in law school, okay? This wasn't a hit and run. I blocked the second number. Then he used a new number to ask me if I wanted him to send a screenshot or a video of the accident to his insurance. I admit, this made me angry. I called his number and dug my nails so hard into my thigh I drew blood as he threatened reporting things, asking me on a date, and trying to entice me just to pay cash. I finally screamed, "Don't contact me again, you fucking inbred piece of shit." My dad heard me and was upset that I said that to someone I was in an accident with. I told him I said that to a guy who thought I was cute and just wanted a date. I blocked the third number. Next day, he reaches out again to tell me that I gave him the wrong policy number. I told him I didn't. He then said it would be easier to pay in cash, that I was the problem, etc. He was talking to his insurance, I guess, and began trying to validate my info. He had my mom's name, address, and phone number. I verified it, told him not to contact me again, and blocked his new number. Next morning, super early, I get a text, basically saying he finished the claim, and that I was awful for making it harder than it needed to be by going through the insurance, and not going on a date with him. He included, "You're so beautiful and ugly at the same time. Don't take risks. Stay on a good path. Goodbye." At this point, I got scared. Fifth number blocked. Then at midnight he texts, "You up? I know where you live. Don't try to screw me over on insurance. I'll report it as a hit and run. You should have gone on a date with me." I took my phone to my dad, showed him the text, and filled him in. My dad, a pretty scary dude, then called the guy. He answers, "Shoot, I knew you were into me. Want to come over?" My dad got very mad, said this is beyond harassment. This is the final warning not to contact me, that we didn't care if he reported it, etc. Robert began saying I came on to him, offered sex as payment, invited him to my house, and was a horny bitch. Instantly blocked, police contacted, insurance notified, all the things. The next day I talked to the insurance company, filed a protective order, got another text telling me I shouldn't involve the police, blocked the seventh number, notified the police, and I'm staying at my dad's because this dude doesn't have his address. My dad is a very, very scary dude who loves his Second Amendment. Late last night, watching Star Wars with my dad and older brother, the doorbell rings. My dad goes to see who it is, and it's fucking Robert with a trash bag filled with things that I supposedly left at his house. I call the police. My dad goes ballistic. Please come arrest the guy. The bag? Lingerie, a knife, lip balm, and Adita Van Test fetish book. Just met with an attorney. Plot twist. Guy doesn't even own the house. He's a legal immigrant, is married, and is being deported. I feel awful that he's being deported. I generally think he wanted to rape or kill me. I go back to school in a few days, and I'm so terrified he or someone else will follow me. He was arrested for stalking, trespassing, felony assault. He tried to push my dad and spit on him. Insurance fraud. He lied about the accident to his insurance agent. Possession with a deadly weapon with intent, the knife that was in the bag. Attempted breaking and entering. They just keep on adding charges. This is a story of someone I knew and had to cut ties with because he was a fucking psycho. The first half will be to add context as to why I cut him off, and the second half is what makes it a Let's Not Meet story. It started 4 years ago when I was living at a friend's house while attending a nearby university. It was myself, my friend, his sister, and their parents. Roughly about 2 weeks into staying there, my friend's sister invited her boyfriend to live in the house too. And by all accounts, he was a pretty cool guy at first, very sociable, and full of great stories. We often sat around the table for drinks, or talked about life having a smoke in the garden. Within the first month, however, he started to get comfortable, and cracks started to show in this veneer. He would rant about government conspiracies. He was big into the Sigma male bullshit and martial arts, and Christ, did he have a temper. He had this big dog he always kept in a cage that was extremely violent when he wasn't around. The dog attacked his girlfriend and had to be put down. That's when the guilt trips torture began, and the ranting became incessant. About 2 months later, he had the bright idea to live in a shipping container, mainly because the parents wanted him out, and dragged his girlfriend along for the ride. I'm not talking about one of those chic, little restoration jobs. This was a rented container in a storage yard among the outskirts of the town that we were living in. He would intimidate and threaten the staff there consistently until they called the police. This, of course, was another conspiracy. He became increasingly abusive to his girlfriend to the point where their family got involved to get her out of there. I stuck close to them, having pretended to be on his side until they could safely get her out. They broke up, which he blamed me for, claiming I was poisoning her against him to make her mine. She has a new partner now, and they're happy. We all blocked his psycho ex on everything possible, but he continued to harass them, until eventually he disappeared, or so we thought. Fast forward to last year. I started to receive messages over social media from several different accounts, blocking each one in turn when I discovered who it was. Some friendly and some hostile. One of the profiles, however, was pretending to be someone I knew from university. We talked about life and how things were going. Eventually, I was invited to a house party, claiming it was a free house and plenty of people were coming. I booked time off work, made my travel plans, and kept talking to this friend coming up to the date of the party. I mentioned it to my friend's sister, and she was interested in going herself, until I mentioned the address, and she panicked. The address in question was a property that belonged to the crazy ex's father that was scheduled for sale. I waited until the day of the party and called the police to check the property, claiming a suspected break-in. They found 5 people there, including my ex. Parked out front was a butcher's van, equipped with food storage and a collection of knives, hammers, and rope. I'm glad I didn't go.